And we also have John here, our next speaker. He's actually an investor from Costanoa Ventures. And yeah, we can just start with discussing some VR tech products here, as we've been talking about it so much today. We can
John,
that.
yes. Hi, John.
Thanks for having me, Ksenia. Hey, Dan, how are you?
Perfect. How are you?
Yeah.
So you just joined. So what we have here? So we have people in Zoom, like participants here. They can turn on the camera and just ask any questions they want. We have Christine here, the previous speaker. She told us how to stay productive and still stay healthy in a remote work. And we're moving from like employee perspective, how to work remotely, to a founder entrepreneur perspective, how to work remotely. And there is a huge like conversation, like Karen is saying that VR will change how we actually communicate to each other and how we change. And that is my first question here. Do you see any like startups on the scene which are exploring VR in a remote work? And do you see potential actually with VR in a remote work?
Yeah, it's a super interesting topic, and I'm sorry that I wasn't here for more of the conversation. I had a board meeting this morning. I think it's a fascinating topic, and I should be honest and say I haven't spent a bunch of time looking at virtual reality solutions post-COVID, and I should, because I think there is a lot of power there, and I totally echo something Karen said, which is if you haven't tried it, just find a way to go try it, because it is a really kind of need to experience it to appreciate it. And I think, you know, from an investor perspective, like it should be said, VR has been something that has been hyped for a long time, and there's always been really interesting tech there. And I'd say adoption has lagged where people thought it would be. I think it's fair to say. It's not to say it's not going to happen. I think it's a classic example of people you know, overestimating what happens in 5 years and maybe underestimating what happens in 15 years. And I think there've been a lot of theories about what the inflection point would be in virtual reality that would trigger adoption. And I think a lot of people felt like it was a price performance threshold of like, once you get a, you know, non-tethered headset at $300 that has this frame rate, adoption will take off. And we've sort of hit a lot of those theorized milestones without adoption taking off. But I'll throw out, without having spent a ton of time thinking about it, that I think COVID could be that inflection point that triggers a lot of adoption, because we're obviously all in a world where it's very hard to get together in person, and virtual reality does replicate a lot of the benefits of that. So it'll be fascinating, and I'll own that I should probably go spend some more time there than I have been recently.
That's cool. John, maybe you can tell us about a little bit more about other projects that are trending now. I'm sure during this like COVID, post-COVID times, there are lots of startups that are focusing on remote work and stuff like that. How to understand what they work for? How to understand what would you like to invest to or not? Yeah,
I think even pre-COVID, collaboration has been a hot topic in venture for a long time. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Distributed teams were already growing in popularity pre-COVID, but also I think if you look at a lot of popular enterprise software, it's not really designed to be very collaborative. And so if you take an example of like note taking, right, where historically all of these different note taking products have been fairly single player, and then you bring a product like Notion into the equation, which is really collaborative and really intended to be worked on across teams. I make a similar analogy to like Excel is very single player, and then you enter Airtable, which is intended to be very collaborative. So I think that's been a hot topic for years, and I think it's just going to get even massively accelerated by COVID. And I think we're looking at all categories of enterprise software and thinking like, how can you take single player experiences and make them multiplayer? I think specifically in COVID, obviously, like the company that maybe has been the single biggest beneficiary is Zoom. And I think what we're seeing now is a lot of people attacking Zoom where, look, it's a really great product. We're using it right now for a reason, but it's a very horizontal product. And as we think about different types of collaboration, and as you look at basically the primitives that make it easier to embed high quality video streaming, you look at like WebRTC, which is an open source project that is basically the backbone of Hangouts getting more and more robust. The idea that everyone needs to be using the same video product, whether you're talking one-on-one or whether you're doing a feedback session or whether you're doing a product jam session or whether you're doing a conference like this, starts to feel, I think, a little crazy. And I think what we'll see is a lot of kind of purpose-built video collaboration products that use open source WebRTC and layer in workflows, layer in integrations to different software products that you might be using, are designed to more naturally fit whatever the engagement is, right? And so we're seeing a lot of really cool stuff there, and I'm super excited about that, both in the infrastructure layer, making it easier to embed WebRTC. So you look at companies like Daily.co, as well as at the application layer that are embedding web streaming and then building products that are built for conferences or built for one-on-ones or built for product brainstorming sessions. I'm really excited about that as well. But I think, zooming out, last point I'll make is like every product category has gotten, I think, disrupted in a really exciting way by COVID. And so whether it be, product, like we have companies in our portfolio that are in e-commerce that are getting, massively accelerated, and people are rethinking what needs to be embedded in those platforms. There's so much opportunity now that I could probably talk for 2 hours straight about different things we're seeing. So I'll pause there. Okay, thank you. We just keep your introduction. So maybe a few words about yourself and Costanoa Ventures. Yeah, I'm a partner at Costanoa Ventures. We're a seed and Series A enterprise technology focused venture capital firm. So everything we do is early stage, and everything we do is enterprise software. But enterprise software we define pretty broadly. We look at horizontal and vertical SaaS. We look at developer tools. We look at security, infrastructure, business marketplaces. So it's a pretty wide canvas of things that we look at. That's great. And we have, I think, a lot of international founders here. And they just like one direct question. Do you invest in only US-based companies, or do you also invest internationally? Absolutely invest internationally. And I'd say we've been doing more and more of that over the last, so we've been in existence for 7 years. We've invested in companies, 4 companies that have come out of Australia. We've invested in companies that have come out of Switzerland. I actually just made an investment, signed a term sheet yesterday in a company out of Africa. So we're very open-minded about investing internationally. And I think one of the great things of COVID is that whatever bias there was to invest locally because you could meet people in person, I haven't met a founder in person since March 15th or whatever it is. And I think that'll actually be to the benefit of international entrepreneurs who want to raise money from Silicon Valley. So we're super excited about the opportunities that we're seeing, internationally. So all of your communication with founders are now remotely. So you're also calling with Zoom and stuff like that, right? Yep, exactly. So one of the challenges has been trying to figure out how to have, I think as seed and Series A investors, we're trying to really get to know the people that we're going to be in business with for 10 years potentially. And so we've been trying different experiments and how to kind of make sure we're having authentic interactions and really getting to know people before we invest, including doing Zooms on a weekend and eating breakfast together and just trying to have a little bit more of that interpersonal connection before we make an investment. But yes, it's been 100% via Zoom. I think I may get together with an entrepreneur, the one I just mentioned. We might try to do like a socially distanced walk sometime in the next week or 2, but that will be the first entrepreneur I've met in person since March 15th. Well, that's great. I think it gives like more opportunity both to you and to international founders. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about, as an early stage investor, what do you look for in startups and founders that you invest in? Yeah. Well, I think, again, as an early stage investor, the single most important thing is the team. And that's, every VC is going to say that, but it's really true. You're investing at a really early stage. There's lots of risk, and you're making a bet on the person and their ability to navigate all of the challenges that are ahead, the ones that and think about, and the multitude of challenges that you have no clue about. There's so many unknown unknowns when you make an early stage investment. So I spent a lot of time with founders and try to understand them. And I think there's a bunch of different things I look for. I'll highlight a few. Like one is I really like founders that understand their markets really, really well. To me, that demonstrates both passion and kind of commitment, but also demonstrates intellectual curiosity and ability to go deep on problems. And so I often spend, the bulk of my first conversation just like, tell me about the problem you're solving. Who are the players? Why are you think this is an interesting problem? Why is it big? Why is your approach unique? Like very, very focused on the market. And it's not just because I'm interested in the market, but it's also for me a way to get a feel for the person and how they think about problems. More personally, I think the thing that I really value in entrepreneurs is being able to balance this belief in yourself and grit and determination with the humility to know what you don't know and delegate your weaknesses and accept input. And it's a really hard thing to balance because, imagine mostly entrepreneurs in this call, like entrepreneurs are the bravest people in the world. And you have to have a deep belief in yourself to go and make a bet on yourself and start a company. And it's also the case that nobody has the full set of skills they need to build the company. You've got to build your team and you've got to take input and develop on your weaknesses. And so I try to ask questions that give me a sense of like both this person's passion, commitment, grit, tell me about a time you failed, and also a little bit about their ability to accept input, their ability to delegate, their understanding of where their weaknesses or gaps are. So that's probably the second thing that I'd highlight. And then another thing that maybe the last one I'll highlight that is a bit of a balance is like balancing the near-term pragmatism with the long-term ambition and optimism. Like we're investing in companies that we believe have potential to be multi-billion-dollar companies. And so like, I want to hear that you can dream big and what your vision for the company can be. And yet, what does today call for? It calls for like making sure you're making payroll, not burning too much money. What are the key hires you need to be working on? And so trying to get a sense for both of those. And that's, again, I think something that's really hard to balance, but the best founders do it really well. So that's what I look for in founders. And, there's lots of stuff we look for in products and markets that I think are probably less relevant and frankly, less important. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Actually, there was like lots of good points here. And I want to say to everyone, if you have any questions, please just jump right in the conversation. You can turn on your video or just the sound and you can interrupt us if you'd like. But I have another question. You're not only investing in startups, right? You also have some portfolio startups right now, and they may experience some difficulties during the current situation. What do you think is what's the best way to support these startups? What are you doing in this kind of direction?
Yeah, well, I think we have a bunch of different ways that we support companies. Some that I think every VC would claim, and then some that I think are specific to our firm. I think the most important thing is being the sort of trusted confidant of the entrepreneur and a thought partner to think through different problems, strategic questions, the day-to-day of just like having a third party who isn't part of the company, but understands it really well. And also has the vantage point of being able to see a bunch of other companies that are trying to navigate this crazy world and seeing what's working in other companies and also what isn't. So I think a lot of my time is just conversations one-on-one with entrepreneurs and trying to help them think through problems. There are more direct operational ways that we engage. We have an operating platform that spends their time with our portfolio, helping them work on key hires, think through sales compensation, think through what their marketing strategy should be. And I play a role in that, but we have, focused operating partners that spend time there. I think it was going to make like one meta point for the current environment is like, I think the world's more dynamic and crazy than it's ever been. I don't think that's even a controversial statement to make in 2020. And what I encourage all of our entrepreneurs to do is to be in like what I call be in an athletic stance. So be ready to make changes, understand where things could, where the rug could be pulled out from under you and what you'll do if let's say we miss this quarter. What are we going to do if we miss this quarter? On the flip side, if we see that things are being massively pulled forward by COVID, as they are in many companies in the portfolio, should we be ramping up burn and making more aggressive bets and hiring more quickly? There's no one size fits all answer to these questions because every company is different and every industry is being impacted differently. But the generic piece of advice is be in a position where you're ready to make decisions quickly and where you're thinking through all of the ways something can play out. And so a lot of my time is just thinking through scenario analysis with our portfolio companies.
Do you think this dynamic, sorry, Dennis, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry, it's a delay between us. Sorry for that.
Yeah, no problem. So I just wanted to ask you if this dynamic environment somewhat affects you, like as a venture capital, do you start picking companies faster, investing faster, maybe make your decisions faster? Does it work that way?
Yeah, I think the most unexpected consequence of COVID for our business has been when it happened, I think everyone assumed that venture markets would slow down because there's so much uncertainty. And I honestly think the answer is they've sped up. And I think there's a combination of reasons for that. I mean, one, if you look at the NASDAQ and publicly traded tech stocks, they're all trading at mostly all-time highs. And so I think that's led to a little bit of euphoria in the market and outcomes seeming bigger. And TBD, I'm not weighing in on whether that will hold or not, but I think there is a reality that when public market tech stocks are at an all-time high, early stage venture is more frothy and people are more excited to make bets. But I actually think the biggest one is just a process change, which is 95% of the industry operated under a norm, which is we have to meet people in person before we make an investment. And I'll own, like, we had never made an investment in someone we hadn't met in person pre-COVID, and we've done 6 now. And I think the dynamic of not having to meet in person just makes things move faster. You don't have to work out schedules and travel. And so as a result, deals just moving way quicker. And I think, I've got a bunch of portfolio companies that have been raising in COVID, and the feedback I've gotten from entrepreneurs is like, it's kind of great. Like, I don't have to go, drive up and down Sand Hill all day and try to figure out when I'm going to be in the city and when I'm going to be in the peninsula and when I'm going to fly to Chicago to meet the 2 Chicago VCs that are interested and the New York VCs. And so I think it's actually a really positive development, as long as one can balance it with the fact that you do need to really get to know the people in both directions. Like, VCs should really get to know the entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs should really get to know the VC. I think it is possible to do it over Zoom. I just think you have to be deliberate about it.
John, I have a question. So we're speaking about the remote world and it's a remote conference, but I don't see remote specific products on the scene, I'm sorry. So basically the product is about collaboration. So collaboration, like mutual collaboration, like remote collaboration, but it's not remote specific topic. It's a like really common one. Do you see any, but as we hear from the employee side, that there is like loneliness when you work remotely, and we need some products to be like, don't feel like lonely, and it's a depression when you work remotely, the rates are much higher. Do you see any products on that space which is like dealing with the situations like that?
Yeah. I haven't seen any products that are specifically tackling the problem of remote employee engagement and happiness. I've seen a lot of products that are generic, like how do you keep your team engaged and happy? And certainly there's a bunch of companies in the mental health tech space as well, but I haven't seen one that's specifically focused on remote. I think it's a great observation and an interesting question, which is like, will there be products that are specifically built for remote versus just built generically? I think a lot of the companies that have been in the employee engagement space, and there's many of them, are trying to quickly move their product to be, to serve the remote workforce. I think it's an open question whether that, and by the way, the same is true across every software category, right? Like if you look at, pick an old Workday, right? Like the most dominant HRIS system, like they're trying to figure out how to make sure their product can more effectively service a distributed remote workforce. I think the question that I don't know the answer to is whether the move to distributed work is so fundamental that there's an opportunity to build entirely new products around remote work that are that basically incumbents are unable to adapt to this shift. I think they're trying really hard, but I can envision reasons why they'll have a hard time doing it. And we have actually made one investment that kind of fits in that theme. It's a company called Beyond HQ, and their grand ambition, their near-term product looks very different, but their grand ambition is to try to build kind of the first operating system for distributed teams. That includes both like the HR stack, as well as like the real estate stack, as well as like the operating stack. So.
Thank you very much. Question to the audience. Do you have questions to John? And I highly encourage you to turn the videos because it's difficult when you don't see the faces and the reaction. If you have any questions concerning the investment in a remote and investment like globally, or you as an employee want to like have a specific idea, it's the moment to ask. But
actually, I have one more question. I'm
sorry?
sorry, Jay, go ahead.
Right. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So, hi, John. Thank you for your insight. One question I have for you as a VC investor, what I guess it depends on the product, but generally, besides the first point as in a strong team, how much traction do you look for in an investment? I mean, I know it can vary, but generally, like on maybe a company on a startup that would need a lot of users to be successful, not necessarily like the most advanced technology, but you know, how much traction for like maybe a social company or yeah, a thing like that, if I could ask.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say I don't know that my answer is going to be super satisfying here, but it's the truth, which is like, it depends. You know, we've invested in teams that are 2 people and 10 PowerPoint slides and pre-product. And we've invested in companies that are, you know, 5 million in ARR and have, you know, very built out teams and very built out business. So I think traction helps. I don't personally prerequisite. Hey, Joe, how's it going? It's not a prerequisite for us to invest. Now, Spit, you mentioned a social product. Like we're enterprise investors, so I would say I'd probably ask consumer investors what they need to see. And I do think in consumer, traction may be more important because getting some early signals of virality and engagement are really important. Whereas in enterprise software, if someone's like, look, this is the problem, I understand it better than anyone, here's software that clearly solves the problem, I think it's a little easier to sort of say like, yes, someone will pay for this versus consumer, which has a little bit more of a, you know, catching lightning in a bottle dynamic.